Hello everyone, in this video I'll look into how I can perform shadow credential attack when we have write permissions over an account in Active Directory that has Active Directory certificate services in place, and this attack will allow us to authenticate as another user without knowing their original password and eventually retrieve their NTLM hash. So let's talk about theory and prerequisites first, and then we'll jump into practical part where I'll show you how to perform the actual attack. So here I'm on Hacker Recipes. This website has a bunch of Active Directory attacks you can learn about. And yeah, this explains it really well. So Active Directory user and computer objects have this attribute called msDS-KeyCredentialLink, where our public keys can be set. And when we're trying to pre-authenticate with PKINIT, which is Kerberos authentication using certificates, the KDC will check that the authenticating user has knowledge of the match and private key, and TGT will be sent if there's a match. I found this blog from SpectreOps, which I'll link in the description below, that explains it really well. I highly recommend you reading this. So there's some graphics which I think will be useful for you, so I'll go over it real quick. So how it usually works, basically there's a secret key, which is user's password. And when you request a TGT, you encrypt ISREC using user's password. And because KDC has knowledge of it, it's able to decrypt it, checks it to make sure it's correct, and it sends you a TGT, which is the standard process how it works in most environments. There's another way that uses certificates, which is PKINIT, which is asymmetric key approach, which means we encrypt with private and we decrypt with public. So here how it works is pre-authentication that data contained in the client certificate and timestamp encrypted with the client's private key. Basically, we have a private and public key pair. Private key is known only to the user, and public key is stored in that attribute called msDS-KeyCredentialLink that anyone can see. And KDC verifies the certificate chain, and it's like, hey, yeah, I was able to decrypt it using your public key, you're good, and sends it the TGT and a session key. And is essentially another method of authentication. Instead of using password, use private and public key pair, which is what we're gonna abuse today. And there are different ways to set it. This article talks about you can either be a member of a special group or you need access control interest. In this example, we'll look into GenericWrite permissions that I have over a user, and that's why we'll be able to perform this attack. And talk about prerequisites a little bit. So the domain has to support PKINIT, which means Kerberos authentication using certificates. It's not on by default. Domain controllers have to enroll a specific template that has Kerberos authentication configured, and DC has to be running Windows Server 2016 or above. So if we go back, oops, my DC just turned off, so I'll just power it back on real quick. So here I have my ADCS server, just to show you real quick. Here it has to be either default domain controller authentication that supports KDC authentication, smart card login. That's gonna enable domain controller to support Kerberos authentication, which is one of the requirements. And yeah, domain controller has its own key pair, which is if you have ADCS enabled, this is by default. And we need an account that obviously has some kind of permissions over a user that would allow us to edit this attribute, msDS-KeyCredentialLink. In our environment, already have it all set up. Run Bloodhound real quick and collect all the data. So we have our user P Parker that we own. And if we click on outbound, basically we can see that we have GenericWrite over administrator. And if we click on this edge and click on Linux abuse, we can see that shadow credential attack is part of it. Because we have write permissions for this user, we can set the attribute and perform the attack. So let's dive right into the practical part to actually do the attack. For this, we'll need this tool called PyWhisker. There's a Python version, there's also a Windows version that you can use to perform the attack from Windows. I already have it installed, it's pretty much the same, you just clone the repo and you run setup.py to build the executable, and you can essentially do the attack. So I have it right here, I run PyWhisker. You can look at all the options, it's pretty much straightforward. But to do the actual attack, we'll need the following flags. So we'll need our domain, our user that has permissions over another user. In our case, it is P. Parker, a user that we theoretically compromised. And we have our target, which is going to be administrator, and action needs to be add because we're creating a public private key pair, and we're going to write our public key to that msDS-KeyCredentialLink in Active Directory that will allow us to request a TGT as that user. So let's click enter. And here we can see the successful output that creates a certificate for us with a private key, and public key was written to the msDS-KeyCredentialLink attribute. And now we can use this with certify to perform parse the hash attack and get the NTLM hash for our user. But before we do that, we need to make sure we remove the password from the PFX because it's password protected right now. Since certify doesn't actually support encrypted PFX files, it shouldn't be protected by password for it to work. And the command for certify would look like this. So we need to give it the PFX we just created. And the protected password, which is going to be right here. And we'll save it as, let's call it admin.getpass. So now the certificate will be for user administrator. There you go. And now we can use certify to do our typical pass the certificate attack to get the actual hash. Give it our new PFX. And yeah, you very sure if you've seen any of my ADCS attack series, you already know these commands, but it's basically authenticate using the certificate to specify our domain controller IP, username, and our domain. Hit enter. And we got the NTLM hash for administrator user. And we can confirm this by running something like wmexec. Oops, I misspelled the right around. Sometimes you just forget the syntax. So yeah, it needs the FQDN, not just the domain. So I'll just give it the actual IP. And .mi. And we're the main admin for this domain environment, which is amazing. Like, this attack is pretty cool. Every time you're inside an ADCS environment and all the prerequisites are met, instead of like changing the password or perform targeted Kerberos, which doesn't always work because let's be honest, passwords are better nowadays. Companies actually configure password policies to be secure. So this may not always work, but shadow credential is an excellent attack. You don't cause any disruption, you just add another authentication method basically, and you steal user's hash. Now we just need to clean up after ourselves, and this very similar command using whisker. Instead of add, you add clear. I'm just gonna clear the msDS-KeyCredentialLink attribute and remove the public key. So hit enter, and yeah, this has been cleared. As per mitigation, just make sure you don't have any dangerous ACL set for users. So for example here, a regular user P Parker that has no extra privileges, just regular domain users, has GenericWrite over administrator user, which is pretty bad. Probably won't see it as often in real environments, but still might happen. Usually you'll see that something like this user might have GenericWrite over another user that you can take over. Maybe you could escalate from there. Maybe that user will have some more permissions and so on and so forth to perform lateral movement. But yeah, that was it. Thank you for watching. Again, I'll link this in the description below so you could read more about it, and hopefully that will make more sense to you in case this explanation by me didn't. But yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Bye.